I'd like to call this Board of Selectmen's meeting to order if I could. Could I have an acceptance of the agenda, please?
So moved.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Are there any walk-ins tonight? Okay. Moving right along to number 3, we're going to meet an applicant for the Council on Aging. Is Mrs. Young here, Deborah Young? Do you mind just coming up to the table, just introducing yourself to us and telling us why you'd like to serve, and we'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. Somewhere
Actually,
close,
you do.
if you wouldn't mind saying your name and address, I'm sorry.
Certainly. Hi, thank you for meeting me tonight. My name is Deborah Young. I live at 17 Maple Avenue in Scituate. I'm a native of Massachusetts. I've lived in Scituate since 1989, and I've grown to have some concern and the desire to learn about the aging population in the town where I live through my own experiences that I've had lately. I can see that there's a lot of issues that come up with seniors that don't just affect the seniors, but they can affect multi-generations within a family as well. So I have a lot to learn, I'll admit, but I have the willingness to learn and hopefully learn more about how the Council on Aging operates and participate in decision-making or just helping in any way that I can. I've participated in some of the activities at the Senior Center that I think are very, very important, and I can see where, for example, I had to bring my mother up from North Carolina. If she did not have the funds to do everything that I had to do for her, it would have been a nightmare. And I'm thankful that she persevered, but a lot of people, either they don't persevere or maybe they just fall on hard times. And I would just like to do something for the community to help protect seniors, and I think they deserve respect and maybe help a family in need if there are seniors involved somehow.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Does
Yep.
anyone have any comments or questions? for her?
Debbie's my neighbor. I think she'd be a great fit for the Council on Aging, and
You
Debbie?
ready for this obligation? It's a big responsibility. They're in the midst of, it's a really great time to get involved, so a lot's happening, a lot's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, so.
I don't doubt it one bit, but I don't work full-time anymore, so besides maybe my one day a week that I work and dealing with my mother, I do have some free time, and I can put in time to help out,
Good.
excellent.
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. We're going to be
Oh,
making the
thank you.
appointment later on.
Okay,
So
sure.
you're welcome to stay. It's
Oh, all right.
all right. Agenda item number 4 is with transfer a common Vic's license for the Sand Hills General Store, otherwise known as Flynn's, Riddles, for many, many years.
Thornton's, I think, is another one.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
History of stores.
First of all, I'll probably speak on behalf of the whole board and especially the neighborhood. Thank you for stepping up.
Absolutely.
Those little stores, is when your children growing up around Scituate, kind of important part of the neighborhood. And I'm sure John agrees because he lives near.
Not kind of, it's a really important part of the neighborhood.
If you could just introduce yourselves, your names and your addresses before you.
My name's Ashley Lathrop. I also live on Turner Road, so I live actually next door to the store for the past year. And
I'm Mike Violande, and Ashley and I live together, and we live above the store now, but we lived next to the store previously to that.
And we're really excited for the store. Like you guys said, there have been a history of stores there that have done really well, and unfortunately, it fell into some bad ownership, and we're just looking to bring it back to the days that it was thriving. People enjoyed being in there. People wanted to be comfortable, get their coffee, get food, whatever needs you want, and we're just looking to provide that like comfortable environment.
And we want to focus on kind of a family-centric store that's going to allow the whole community to kind of get together, have one place to be able to go to get their coffee if you're in the Sandhills community especially.
Or any
community for that matter, but we really want a good place for people to go and a dependable store for everyone, so.
Sounds good. I'll open it up to the board.
Just
John?
a couple of quick questions. What were you thinking as far as hours go?
As of right now, we're thinking 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., which is very similar to the hours I think of previous stores there.
Okay.
And possibly in the winter, depending how things go, maybe 9 o'clock in the winter. But as of right now, 6 to 10 every day.
You say 6 a.m. to 10 a.m.?
Oh, I'm sorry, p.m.
Oh, PM, correct, yeah.
When are you looking to open?
Hopefully midweek next week, as long as inspections and everything passes.
Excellent.
Yep.
Oh, you got my support.
Answered my questions.
Yeah, same format. I mean, just, obviously the design will be different, but selling the same type of,
Same type of
goods and-
products.
Yep, same products, and I mean, with a few small additions here and there, and some upgrades. We've done a ton of upgrades inside the store, and we think it's something that everyone's really going to enjoy, and I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air for the area, so.
Any ice cream, or are you looking to do the ice cream, or are you looking to do any type of like fry foods, or?
We are
Oops, sorry.
we are looking to bring back ice cream probably for next summer, but for this year we are going to have coffee, breakfast sandwiches, deli sandwiches, deli meats if anybody wants to buy their deli meats there, and just any kind of packaged snack foods as well. But and a penny candy store.
Penny
candy
candy.
for the kids.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that's great. I just asked Tony very quickly, and by all means, go ahead and do it if you're going to sell tobacco. Just be careful. I'm liaison of Board of Health, and, make sure if this is new to you,
Yep.
make sure you've educated yourselves on
Right.
how to
course.
sell, who not to sell, all that tricky stuff.
Yeah,
course.
absolutely.
Well, good luck.
I'll make a motion. You want one?
Please.
I'll move the Board of Selectmen vote to grant a common viculars license to Sandhills Group LLC, doing business as Sandhills General Store at 160 Turner Road, Scituate, conditioned upon successful inspection by the town departments.
I have a motion. How about a second?
Second.
And I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Good
Thank
luck.
you very much for your time. Thank you.
A lot of hours.
We look forward to it.
Good. The next is a discussion and a vote for the cell tower that we've previously spoke about on Wampatuck School. It's now Tilden Road, which we all know, and now we're here to look at it to possibly, we've been asked by AT&T to revisit Wampatuck School. If the proponents are here, I'd ask them to come forward and introduce themselves. Before we get into a discussion, in case anyone's noticed, I know we have Tricia Bencasey, town administrator, was not feeling very well. So this is Jim Toomey from Town Council. He was going to be here anyway, and I just asked him to sit in the hot seat, keep us out of trouble. So if I attended, I think, your ZBA meeting in June. I think others went to others at different times. That was an education for me, at the least. I visited some of the neighbors in the area.
Sure.
Pretty well up to speed on everything, but at this time, I'll turn it over to you. And
Great, so I might be a familiar face for those who have come to the zoning hearings. My name is Edward Parry, it's P-A-R-E. I'm an attorney at Brown Rudnick, representing AT&T. With me is Brooke Thompson, Regional Vice President of External Affairs at AT&T. So if any of the board members have questions directly to AT&T, Brooke took the drive down to lovely Scituate today. Well, we're kind of at a point with the zoning board where we're at decision time for 361 Tilden. As you know, we approached the town to look at some town-owned sites. At one point, Wampatuck Elementary School was a location that was amenable to the town. Went to town meeting, the Board of Selectmen was supportive. Unfortunately, the deal sort of died on the vine. Back in early 2013, AT&T resurrected the need for a site in the area. So we reached out to the selectmen once again, the town, for some obvious benefits, rent, location, which seemed to be acceptable. And for some reason, the vote failed 2-2, so we went back to the privately owned site at 361 Tilden. I think at and T has done a very good job in looking at all alternatives that have been presented. We've looked at some 30, 31 sites that we've analyzed. I think we've analyzed every site that has become a question, either from the neighbors on Tilden or others in the general public. We've looked at alternative technologies such as DAS, and it's apparent to us we're just at the point where it's decision time for the zoning board, and we're not here to circumvent that process. We respect that process, and we will continue along the way. But in discussing the situation with at and T, we've obviously attracted a lot of attention at our hearings. We wanted to take one last try with the town to see if Wampatuck was available. It's the one site that does work for at and T, at the same height as the Tilden site. Based on innumerable emails I received and comments at the public hearing, it seemed that possibly there was some concern with the proximity of the proposed tower at the Wampatuck School during the last go-around. During the first or second hearing, and I know your familiar faces also, someone raised a question as to why it was selected, and that was really part of the RFP process. So we didn't select where the actual location of the tower would be. We were looking something more globally on the Wampatuck School property, but the RFP fixed the location. So in doing our homework and talking with at and T and trying to reach what could be a win-win for everyone, deal with the neighbors at 361 Tilden, we know we're putting in a piece of steel that is going to rise up to 150 feet. If there are alternatives, we're more than happy to discuss those and have discussed those over the last couple of years. But in trying to get to the end game, we're back one more time to say, if there was a problem with location, we can work on location at Wampatuck. If there's an appetite to go back to Wampatuck, we've informed the zoning board that we would work with the Board of Selectmen in the town to keep things on a pace to move forward. But if that, in fact, in good faith, was the community's designated site of choice for the coverage gaps that we have, we would work with the town. We would postpone the zoning hearing at the ZBA until such time that Wampatuck worked out or didn't work out, because we also have to go back to zoning for that one. So it's with that sense of commitment to trying to deal with resolving all issues possible. We're back before you this evening to ask if you're interested in Wampatuck. We're willing to entertain those discussions, and we'll continue to work with the town through this process, and we will extend all of the decision dates with the zoning board. So with that said, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I know Brooke is also.
Okay, I'll open it up to the board first. I just had one thought, and it was a quick one, but if anyone else has any questions, they could go first. Any other thoughts? No?
I mean, I guess I can start. It's it's been a long path. A couple years ago, we started down this path, and then it went away, and I think most of us here thought it would go away forever, and it came back. And it's a very difficult decision, because no matter where you put it, you're going to upset people. And I was at the meeting when you talked about the DAS system. Just so people understand, that just doesn't work. It's just not going to be a powerful enough signal to get the coverage that you need, was the sense that I got from the meeting.
And which was confirmed by the town's consultant that was hired independent of at and T, or both consultants, actually. So yeah, I think we've done our analysis of.
So that was kind of the first hope that I think a lot of people had. Another conversation that came up is piggybacking on other towers that already exist. And I don't know if that's still in play or not in play, but certainly not having to erect a tower somewhere would be beneficial to the residents, or preferred by the residents. What is this?
Well, it was kind of a hypothetical that was pushed out there by one member of the zoning board. I could tell you that they're not going to function, even if we raise them up to 300 feet. And I don't want to steal the thunder when we go back to the zoning board or the information. But even if we raised each of the towers 100 feet, which isn't even possible, but if we did that hypothetically,
right,
we would have significant gaps. So that's just not an option, and we're not just
I mean,
disposing of all options.
I saw all the graphs. I saw, it's just a big circle around wherever you're going to put the center of it. I guess the other one that is really been discussed about is it Niles? What's the name of that other street?
Niles.
Niles. I read in the paper, though, that just isn't something that at and T is interested in. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So that is there a reason for that? I wasn't at, is it wet, or is it low, or is it?
Well, we haven't engineered it because it doesn't work for us from an RF perspective, so we're going to lose coverage down along the coastline, even if we went up to 200 feet. So the analysis we showed to the zoning board was that even at 200 feet, we're going to open up coverage gaps. There are a lot of wetlands on site. I'm not familiar with whether, that can be overcome. It would take Conservation Commission review and approval. I don't know that that's forthcoming. Just the idea of designing a site that wouldn't work for us anyway,
Right.
just didn't make a tremendous amount of
I'm
sense.
just kind of bringing the discussion to the points that I've
Yep.
heard, and so everybody can hear why it doesn't work, or from your perspective. And just so everybody else knows, this is not our decision to make. at and T has the right by federal law to put cell towers up to get coverage. And we discussed this before, and as far as I can understand, a cell tower is going to go somewhere in Scituate to get that coverage that you're lacking right now. And the discussion is where, of the few limited places that you'll accept it for the coverage reasons, where do we want it to go? Is that an accurate statement?
I think that's a fair representation of what we're looking at.
Right. My opinion, whenever it was, how many months, right before annual town meeting, was that the town, if everything else was the same, then the town should try and get the funds from it as opposed to a private resident. I don't want it anywhere, but if it's going to have to go somewhere, then I would say the town should reap the benefit of the funds, was my thought back then. It's a really difficult one, though, so that's where I was.
On the original RFP for Wampatuck, what was the proximity to the school?
I'm not sure the distance, but it was over, and I went by the school again today just to get reacquainted, but if you go in the first entrance, there's sort of a gravel road that continues past some of the playground areas. It was designated to be back into that tree line there. So I'm not sure exactly how far away it was from the school. It was about 25 feet off the property line. And again, based on some of the comments, that may have been, part of the concern. Again, we don't have a specific location tonight in mind. I suggested in providing the plot map that maybe we could get further away from the school by going to that, northernmost point. I understand that there is some land in the back there that might have problems being developed in the future. So we don't have anything specific. It's just, if that particular corner was the real issue,
Right.
we would work to see if we could find a location that's better. The RFP can issue, it can issue for the property,
Okay.
and then we can work with the town on the lease and the designation of the location.
All set for now, Marty?
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, some people have raised some issues, Attorney Perry, about inciting in particular a cell tower in Wellesley that had fallen back in 2009 due to a fire and some welding that was going on. Obviously, this is going to be cited somewhere, and if it gets cited here, that's obviously an issue that the town's concerned about, I would be. Was that an at and T tower? I don't want to say realistic concern. I think it is a concern. Something fire, and the timing, I think from what I understood, it was around 30 minutes for the whole tower to burn and then finally fall over. Given that if we decide to put this and the town decides to put it next to a school, that's a concern that certainly can be raised.
Listen, there are concerns that are going to be raised going next to a school. I mean, I'm a reasonable person, I'm logical, I have children of my own. It just makes sense that, those concerns be raised and addressed through a public hearing process. Specifically to the tower in Wellesley, the tower itself didn't fail. I mean, it was constructed in accordance with code. Someone went in there and did some welding, and they caught the cables on fire. And basically, the cables caught on fire, went right up the monopole, and it tipped over. We build our sites in compliance with code. They can be designed so that they don't fall over directly, but things can happen. I mean, situations can occur. Can I assure you that, it would be impossible? Of course not. Someone could go and tamper with it, which is what happened. Someone who was doing maintenance on the tower didn't know what they were doing, and they lit the coax cable on fire. Not the tower, the cable itself. We can present engineering and give you assurances as to the safety of these, the, health issues. Those are all concerns when we're located near a school property. I could tell you that we do locate on school properties.
That was going to be my next question.
We located neighborhoods. We're on top of hospitals, on the roofs of schools. I did a site in Middletown, Rhode Island, where we incorporated a flagpole into the building itself. So the pole actually is attached to the building, and it's a 150-foot flagpole that doubles as a cell tower. And frankly, it looks more like a cell tower than a flagpole, but, it does perform that dual function, and the town receives the revenue. And we satisfied the building commissioner that it was constructed in accordance with code. It's like anything, as I said...
Is that something that, again, this isn't the zoning board, I fully understand that, and those are things that, if it goes from here to there, would be fully vetted at the zoning board.
Sure.
But is that something that a flagpole could be put up as opposed to the monopole with things on it, and as opposed to a big gigantic pine tree versus a huge tower, for aesthetics reasons?
Yeah, there are applications for a flagpole or something with internally mounted antennas, and we'd have to talk with the zoning board and our radio frequency engineers to see what kind of limitations that causes. When you mount the antennas internally, you get restricted on how many antennas you can get in there. The best, design for these installations, not just AT&T, but all of its, competitors, is to have a full array like you have here at the high school, where you can adjust the number of antennas as technology changes. If you squeeze those antennas into a small space, you're just physically limited to how many carriers can attach, because there's only so much room inside. And I would encourage you to take a look out, behind where the cell tower is. The coax cable that we talk about is not like cable TV coax. This is, significant inch and 5/8, 2-inch coax. So if you take a look at the coax and the antennas on your tower here, what we would have to do is literally squeeze everything into a pole. The more we squeeze in, the bigger the diameter gets, and the less flagpole looking like it becomes. But, we would certainly work with, the zoning board on the design. We would explain to them what the limitations are, co-location-wise. We know that there are coverage issues here, and it's not just AT&T. And again, not to drag in the zoning board process, but Verizon is interested in the Tilden Road site. My guess is Verizon would be very interested. And I know for a fact they're interested in Wampatuck, because my understanding is that they bid in the last RFP round. I think they actually bid higher than we did. So we know there's a need here, design we can work with, but again, it would be a matter of going to the zoning board and saying, if you push the antennas inside, you may only get one carrier, or maybe two carriers, and we're going to need another facility somewhere else. We'd have to look at the photos. We do balloon tests for the zoning board, so depending if you did push it up against the trees, I'm not saying that the tree towers look like trees. They just camouflage what we're actually doing there and hide some of the clutter coming off the pole itself. That might be a situation that works if the trees are high enough in the background. It may be a situation where it doesn't. So design is certainly something we can talk about.
All set for now?
Yeah.
You've answered a couple of my questions. It might not even be yours, but I think there's a cell tower on Route 2 that I see when I'm coming east out around Shirley or somewhere like that, and it's disguised as a pine tree. Now, if it was a pine tree, that was my very question, it could have more carriers on it, correct? Than a flagpole like we see in Pembroke on 53. Right in front of the fire station, there's one there.
Correct. The number of slots are greater because you can push
Externally.
the antennas on the outside, so we could actually have 12 antennas on the outside, with a flagpole would be forced to use those antennas inside. And there are different types of trees. Design is something we can work with.
Big
I'm
elm
not
tree.
familiar with that. Yeah.
I was going to say, a nice gigantic,
No, it's funny, when you're traveling east, Jim might know where I'm talking about, you're coming east, the tree line's even, then there's one that sticks up, and I've seen it year after year, so I assume that's what it must be.
And it is just a monopole that's painted brown, like, the tree trunk, and then we use fiberglass branches so the signal doesn't get attenuated.
Oh, I
And-
thought, all right, Okay,
So
I thought
it-
those, the branches were antennas, but they're not.
They're not.
Right,
The
okay.
antennas are actually inside, so that's a good thing, because obviously we're hiding the antennas there.
Okay, all right. Wampatuck versus Tilden. Let's say you built it. What you want? Would 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, you'd come back and want another one at 361 Tilden?
Oh, no, Wampatuck would be a replacement for Tilden,
For sure.
for sure. We've testified to that on numerous occasions.
I want to talk about the fall zone a little bit.
Yep.
On Tilden Road, I think where it was proposed, if you have a 150-foot monopole, do you have to set it back 150 feet? You want it to fall on your property in all four directions.
Right.
Can it fall on your neighbor's property?
Well, it's designed not to fall at all.
No, I know it's, and I know it's not going to, but,
So
in
what
the
we-
event.
Yeah, what we've done, your zoning bylaw has the zoning bylaw says that the planning board may require a fall zone of the height of the tower plus 5 feet.
Okay.
I do a lot of these, but I think that is the Scituate standard. So we proposed a 150-foot pole, we're supposed to have a 155-foot fall zone.
So that's, you proposed for Tilden Road.
We did not. We don't have that much land on Tilden Road. At 361 Tilden, there's not enough room to accommodate that. So we have proposed a fall, we centered the tower so that we're 80 feet from all the property lines. And then we supplied engineering letter to the zoning board, which says the tower can be designed to fall upon itself so that it's not going to break at the bottom and fall over onto someone else's property. If it's going to have any problem, it's going to deflect, and they can decide where that deflection would occur so that it's not breaking at the bottom but falling upon itself. So we addressed the public safety concern with a fall zone through the engineering letter to the zoning board. So do we have a 155-foot fall zone? We do not. We're providing half of it at 80 feet with the understanding that the tower will be designed to fall upon itself.
Right. Yeah, we implode buildings, not we, but people implode buildings, so they're gonna fall inside themselves, but they don't always go that way.
They don't, and it's,
Mother Nature might, the wind could be, and I understand what you're saying, it's gonna break halfway up, and the idea is, what about at Wampatuck? If I'm looking at this map correctly, is that drawn to scale, Ed? Would that have the same, if it fell, well, I guess, I don't think there are homes behind there. I'm not sure if it fell in that direction. I don't know.
yeah, the initial location, and I can't really tell why it was, selected. I mean, it was selected obviously to keep it as far away from the school as possible. My understanding is there are not homes behind here, that these may be paper
Well,
streets.
those are paper streets, but the paper's kind of cut off. Ermine Road is an existing road that might be the closest if
Okay.
but I can't read this because it got cut off. But there's certainly the other roads do not exist except for on paper.
Do you have the plans that I had emailed over? If you take a look,
Just all four of these small pages.
you see where Ermine Street is?
Yeah.
Yes.
Map 34, block 18.
Yep.
Lot 14E. You see that? It's got a number
14F.
15 on it? Yeah, 14F, I'm
14F,
sorry.
yeah.
And it's got number 15 in the middle of the house.
Yep.
That house is 339 feet from the tower. If you take a look, you see the perpendicular line coming off that lot, and then if you go down to where the tower is located,
What's 15, Ed? Is that the house number?
That's the house number.
I think so.
No, it's not. It's 17. It's Stephen Gustafson's house. I know it well. But anyway, that's 300
Good
feet?
question.
That's 339 feet.
Okay. The last, if I can just ask one more question, to Tony's point, I was with Neil Duggan, zoning enforcement officer, building inspector, as well as Patrick, our conservation agent today. The topic came up about Niles Road. Neil said there's no way you can get there. Just to answer your question, it's really not the topic for tonight. We're talking about Wampatuck School, we're talking about Tilden Road, but just, you mentioned it, so I just wanted to say that. The road was supposed to continue on through, it didn't, there's wetlands all around it. Neil had asked Patrick if something could be built. Patrick said it would be very, very difficult to build something. They'd have to build a road to get to the site. It would be difficult, very difficult to do. I just wanted to mention those few things. Tony, you had one
Yeah,
other
just
thought?
one more question that we touched on, John mentioned briefly, but, I mean, our biggest concern is the health. You know, that's what the school issue. I have 4 kids, but none of them are in Wampatuck, and if I did, I'd be concerned, and I'm sure I see kids in the audience. So, you know, if there's a health issue, no matter what the site is, we don't want it there. I mean, there's one right here, which is right near our high school, but how can people feel comfortable that there's, you know, the difference between the two sites is it's at the school property all day long. So it's going to hit a larger number of kids. Again, I'm not a scientist, I don't know the radiation or whatever, but for a shorter period of time than if it was next to somebody's house, but more kids for a shorter period of time. So how do you make those families feel comfortable that there's not a risk?
First of all, they're not going to listen to me because I'm not an engineer either, so I'm here to, you know, to try to push this forward. The last time that we dealt with Wampatuck, we brought in a health physicist that doesn't work for AT&T. He gets hired from time to time by AT&T, but he gets hired by municipalities and in fact worked for the town. And I guess, I don't know if it's annually or or every couple of years, he does testing on behalf of the town because you have one here, you know, next to the high school. So we brought him to an open meeting, which we would be happy to do again. Listen, the concerns are real, you know. The only thing that we can do is explain the science and explain the facts. Not everyone's going to accept them. People are going to argue. No matter what we say, there will be detractors. And if you go online and Google RF emissions, you'll find lots of studies. Some are good, some are bad. But this gentleman has a professional reputation, and including with, you know, the Board of Selectmen and retaining him to do their own testing, and he's an expert in what this does. We will bring him back. The first time, the meeting wasn't well-attended, but we'll bring him back. If the town is interested, we will do the same thing we did last time. We will, you know, notice a meeting through the school. We met at the school auditorium. We'll answer every question for as long as it takes. And it's a gentleman who's, you know, he's beyond reproach. He's got excellent credentials, and I think if you asked any municipality, they would agree. Now, again, we're not going to convince everyone, but if people listen to the science and are willing to at least hear what he has to say, just as I do, you know, you feel confident that the standards are well set, they're well researched, and the concerns that are raised are, for the most part, not founded. And the big concerns right now are more with the handsets than with the towers, and that's where the studies are taking place, is what's the impact of holding the phone, and he'll explain this, I've seen him do it numerous times. What is the impact of holding this phone to your ear, or having it on your belt, or having it in your pocket for a long term? The emissions out of the towers, or the antennas, the towers don't emit anything, the emissions out of the antennas are very low power, they're aimed at the horizon, and it's sort of like a flashlight where the beam goes out and it spreads out, and where it reaches the ground, you can connect back to it and, you know, get on whatever network there is. We're happy to do that. We'd prefer that everyone understand what's going on, and we understand there will be detractors that no matter what we say,
Right. Yeah.
they're not going to accept his presentation, but we're willing to do it.
I mean, I think that's what my dilemma is, but, you know, I guess the other side of it, if it's going 10 houses down the street anyways, then there's some sort of fallout from that location on the school as well. So it's, you know, it's a no-win situation. You know, I really don't know. The only other thing I wanted to make you comment is that at some point in time, the town is going to decide. I mean, we right here tonight could say, we believe we want to pursue it because, you know, in my case, if there's X number of tens of thousands of dollars to be had, then the town should reap that benefit. But eventually, it goes to town meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, you know, they're going to vote as to whether we lease the land to AT&T. So the decision eventually is made by a town meeting. Is that?
I think in this particular case, there was a vote, 2/3 vote at town meeting, and I think it was the annual meeting in 2011, which approved the lease, and that approval is still valid.
Okay.
So,
Doesn't mean you couldn't bring it back to town meeting again, but
Right.
right now you have the authority to go ahead with an RFP and a lease.
Could you continue down that path? If that was my next question. If this was voted to revisit Wampatuck, could you maybe take us down that path? I don't want to hear from the proponent, but, you know, what meetings, public meetings would take place and so forth? Back to the ZBA, close that hearing,
The next,
reopen?
right, the next step in the process would be for the board, for town manager to issue an RFP, which would spell out, you know, in detail what the requirements are. That would be responded to by presumably AT&T, and other carriers could compete for that as well. It's an RFP process, so the board looks not only at the price, but the other aspects of it. If the board accepts that, they now have the authority to do that and to have the project proceed. At that point, there'd be a new application filed by AT&T for a permit with the Zoning Board of Appeals. The hearings would start, and as I understand it, there isn't a consensus between AT&T and the Zoning Board of Appeals that the current Tilden Road site would be put on hold. And if the Wampatuck went forward, then that would be dropped once the Wampatuck permitting process was completed.
Okay.
So that would be the steps that would be taken. Basically, it's the RFP, review of the RFP responses by the Board of Selectmen, and a decision on whether and to whom it would be awarded. And then that would allow whoever's successful with the RFP to go to the zoning board and start the process again.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'll open it up to the public, neighbors, whoever would like to speak. If you could just, I'll get to everyone. If you could just identify, you know, yourself and your address, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. This woman in the back with her hand up.
Carla Bratton, 18 Marshall Ave. So, my research has indicated that there are credible reasons as to why you should vote no for a cell tower at Wampatuck. Number one, we keep on missing the point that the radio frequency fields given off by cell phones and cell phone towers is a type of non-ionizing radiation. So they're one of the same. And then in 2011, the International Agency for Research on Cancer and also the World Health Organization has classified RF energy as possibly carcinogenic to humans. So the IRAC's classification of RF energy reflects that the fact that some limited evidence exists that RF energy might be a risk factor for cancer. So at present, the evidence of a possible link between RF energy exposure and cancer risk is far from conclusive, and more research is needed to clarify this possible link. So both the World Health Organization and IARC agree that additional research in this area is warranted. I also received an email today from the Environmental Working Group asking people to petition because the FCC is accepting public comments on its cell phone radiation standards. They're trying to change the standards that FCC has currently set. So, from the letter from the EPA about the adequacy of the Federal Communications Commission's RF exposure guidelines and non-thermal effects of RF radiation, it states that, I believe that it is correct to say that there is uncertainty about whether or not current guidelines adequately treat non-thermal prolonged exposures that may continue on an intermittent basis for many years. The guidelines currently used by the FCC were adopted by the FCC in 1996, hence the reason why they're trying to change their regulations at this point. It also states that the FCC's exposure guidelines is considered protective of effects arising from a thermal mechanism, but not from all possible mechanisms. Therefore, the generalization by many that the guidelines protect human beings from harm by any or all mechanisms is not justified. Federal health and safety agencies have not yet developed policies concerning possible risk from long-term non-thermal exposures. So why do we want to experiment with 25% of the children here in Scituate. Also, children's skulls and scopes are thinner, so the radiation can penetrate deeper into the brains of children and young adults. The cells are dividing at a faster rate, so the impact of radiation can be much larger. That's a quote from Dr. Keith Blackman, he's the chairman of neurology at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. So in January 2008, the National Research Council, an arm of the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Engineering, issued a report saying that we simply don't know enough about the potential health risks of long-term exposure to RF energy from cell phones themselves and cell towers. The scientists who prepared the report emphasized in particular the unknown risk to the health of children. Because so much of the cellular technology is new and evolving, we don't have enough data on the consequences of 10, 20, or 30 years worth of exposure to the RF energy that they emit. And I'm not sure if you guys have familiarized yourself with the Bioinitiative report, but it does state that not everything is known yet about cell towers. But what is clear is that the existing public safety standards limiting these radiation levels in nearly every country look to be thousands of times too lenient. Again, that is why today the FCC we're trying to petition as a whole in the United States to change their regulations. There is strongly suggested evidence that RF exposures in children will change their brain function, including memory loss, retarded learning, slower motor function, and other performance impairments in children, such as headaches, fatigue, and sleep disorders. So I don't understand how it could be considered to expose 25% of the children in this town to these risks that cell towers pose until definitive answers are known. I think until we get answers and you can confirm that it is safe for our children and generations of children to come, I respectfully request that you guys please say no to our cell tower replacement at Wampatuck.
Tony?
Yeah, can I ask you a question? I completely understand what you're saying, but here's what I'm troubled with. Sean just drew a map for me as to where the others, it's going to go in one of these two places. So it's going to go right over Wampatuck if it isn't in Wampatuck's backyard. So I'm a little what is your thought on that?
It's a lot further down the road.
But it's going to be aimed, I mean, he just said it's like a flashlight. So it's
wider.
It's going to start out and it's going to expand. So the area is going to be covered. And I'm not a scientist, I don't know. But it seems to me if it's a bad health issue, no matter what site you put it on, it's going to be that. And we've got them all over the country and all over the town. And the other point I just want to make for your answer is, you know, if the FCC changes the regulations, then AT&T is going to have to, and as all the carriers are going to have to adhere to it. So, I mean, I think if something is known, it's going to be acted on pretty quickly. But that's what I'm.
So there are suggestions out there to have it at least 1,000 feet away from schools. Some states have also made regulations stating that it should be so many feet away from schools, and 1,000 feet is usually like a recommendation that I've seen out there before.
Jim, just a question for Jim. They don't have to come before us. This is before the ZBA at 361 Tilden Road. The decision's made, it can be appealed, and if they're successful, it can be built, to Tony's point.
Once a cell phone provider proves that there's a substantial gap in service, then federal law kicks in and it overrides all local zoning, all local regulations, and essentially preempts any local or state regulations, and the town has to issue that permit. If it doesn't, the court will issue or order the issuance of that permit. And the question is this site available? And if it is, then the town has no choice in this thing. And in fact, the federal law says that this issue of safety, as long as there's compliance with the FCC standards, is not a factor that can be considered by the ZBA in the permitting process. I know typically the cell phone providers will address that in the hearing process, but it cannot be a factor in a determination to deny a permit.
Carla, so I'm afraid it's almost as simple as what Tony just said. It's either there or here, and what do we want the money or have a private individual have it? I don't think he can be any clearer. But you can shake your head, but,
It's like a sellout if you decide to take it for money.
well, this woman in the front row had a question.
Well, the first, you were asking about the two different locations, and really, the biggest issues with health and radiation is within 500 feet. So 1,000, I think, as Carla said, was to be extraordinarily careful, but I don't know if the Tilden Road, the 361 Tilden would be within 500 feet of the school, would it? I don't have the map.
Of the school?
Right.
No, it's not within 500 feet of the school,
So-
even as the crow flies, I don't think, but it's not much more than that. But there are people that live next to that tower,
Right, and
that
understandable.
sleep, I gotta,
The difference here, and they all have children too. and
that's
so
right,
The whole thing
right,
is
right.
concerning.
I mean, like Tony said, if we had an industrial area that, fit that would be the perfect spot, but we don't. But continue, and then I just have
Sorry.
one other thought.
And Wendy Crum, 17 Gannett Road.
Thank you.
And so I understand that, and it's concerning either way. But to put it near a school, as Carla had mentioned too, we're talking about generations of children. We're talking about children that haven't developed their nervous systems or their brain hasn't fully developed. And quite honestly, I spent a lot of time with oncologists this winter. I've done chemotherapy. I have cancer. I understand a bit about it, and I understand that exposure 10, 20, 30 years ago could be what has caused the cancer in individuals today. So we have the proving grounds behind there that also is questionable. I don't understand why we would put then a cell tower there as well and put our children at further risk. And also the playground is within the fall zone, pretty much at this point. That's scary. I know Mr. Perry said that he went there and he saw the playground and it would be outside of the playground area, but I think it's hard for people to understand the way that Wampatuck is set up. There are 3 different areas where these children play. There are cut-throughs that the children use through the back that would go by where the cell tower is. There's severe safety concerns as well as health concerns. And not to mention, you're talking about 400 students. Should there be a fire? Should there be a storm that falls down? We're talking about the panic and danger that it causes for 400 students that would be there. And when I look at the zoning laws and when I look at what our elected officials are doing, they're supposed to be protecting us and our children from harm and from panic. And this just seems like it would put a real undue stress.
Between us up here, we probably have a dozen children that, we're concerned not only about ours, but everyone.
And I know you
here.
are because of the last vote, and I understand that and I respect that, but I felt as if I had to say my piece one more time. Because
All right, the woman here.
Hi, Maureen Favre, 23 Cherry Lane. It's kind of along the lines of what Carla and Wendy said. My kid's required by law to be in school. My child's a Wampatuck student. Are you going to allow me to relocate my child to another school? And not for anything, but Wampatuck is like the Ellis Island of Scituate. They take the kids from overflow from every school in Scituate. So the number of kids that'll pass through there. So we want the 40,000 or whatever. Why not have the money for us? Well, Philip Morris was okay by the government for years and years until people fought long and hard to say what they've done is wrong, it's not okay. Are we going to have the money as a town to pay back? Not that anyone wants the money. Nobody wants their child to have cancer. Nobody wants their child to have deformed DNA because one of the risks is that their DNA mutates. Nobody wants children who already suffer from sensory issues to have this penetrating their brain and creating more of a sensory issue, more memory loss. How much money do we spend as a town on special needs right now? We can't afford enough aids for the kids in these schools, so we're going to take something that there's even the slightest question, and we're going to put these radio waves flowing through that might mess it up a little bit more for them. How much can we afford? We can't afford $40,000 a year as a town, trust me. We get our overrides every time the school's needed. It's all for our children. So to literally say, well, it could go on a neighbor's, well, this neighbor wants to sell his land or lease his land.
I realize, and his children
The Board
are,
of Appeals, his children might be grown, he could
They
care
are.
less.
they are.
And I get it. And the people who live in his neighborhood, I wouldn't want to, they suffer property devaluation, everything. I get that you're saying that by federal law, we can't say no to them. We can't say no, but if we look long and hard, we can say no to there, and maybe no to there, but maybe yes to the proving ground. And when you look at the radius of a cell tower, why Tilden Road, where half of it is radiating over the ocean? It seems kind of weird to me when you look at a circle of a cell tower, you're talking a block and a half from the ocean at that point of Wampatuck School. Like, you're showing me the circle of that and you're saying that that's the smartest place to put it? I have a hard time with that. And I
I'm not.
apologize if it's gone back and forth, you know, to the point where we approved it a couple of years ago, but they, if I understand correctly, they withdrew their request. So maybe AT&T has to go back through, you know, maybe the town approved it, but AT&T's request was withdrawn. So if they get shut down at zoning, are they shut down and have to start all over again? How does it work? I will end on the note that the International Firefighters Union, AFL-CIO, Position on Health Effects from Radio Frequency Microwave, they have officially opposed cell towers on any of their fire stations based on the fact that there is not enough evidence, that there is enough evidence to say that it's questionable, and that they require brain power and to be as highly functioning as possible. And they have stepped out and said, absolutely not on fire stations. So it's kind of interesting that the International Firefighters Union is saying no, and we're saying, okay, put it at the school. Liability to teachers, pregnant teachers, the fetuses are at risk, the children, and how many people who pass through that school. And they want to put the tower next to the playground that the PTO built, near a parking lot that's insufficient already. So the land is already getting squeezed. So.
All right. The woman over here, then I'll get to you. Could you just, your name
Maria
next.
Byrne, 334 Tilden Road. I'm a little bit troubled about the characterization of federal law that all AT&T has to do is show there's a substantial gap, and then it has a right to put the antenna anywhere they choose. So I think if we look a little bit closer at federal law, especially the way it's been litigated out, court cases have said that local jurisdictions retain their right to the typical zoning reasons based on safety or aesthetics if there's an alternative. And I think in this case, it hasn't really been shown, or the exploration of alternatives really hasn't been done. So I'm also troubled by the characterization is it's got to go on one of these two properties. I just don't see that at all. I've lived in Northern Virginia. If it was the case that once A&T shows or once a provider shows they have a significant gap, they can put an antenna just about anywhere. You know, I think we'd see a whole lot more antennas in backyards as they're proposing on Tilden Road. I have not seen any antennas in backyards. In Northern Virginia, I've seen plenty of examples of small-scale series of antennas. For example, I'm familiar with one on a one-story CBS, there's a flagpole. They also can hug the sides of buildings and be disguised, painted to match the building color. So I just don't see that there's been a full search here or any kind of real search. And the point about Nile Terrace, the road, I don't think having to build a road should be any obstacle. AT&T is going to have to build a road on the Tilden Road site. the Smalls property.
We're talking about wetlands crossing, and that's out of our hands. That's, if it's determined to be wetlands, that's a federal issue.
And the map on the Tilden Road property, the small property, is showing that there's wetlands in that area too. So, there was discussion at the ZBA meeting that it's, a matter of getting a waiver from the appropriate authorities. So I think, that needs to be explored.
And it will be, and I'm not, if it were to go to Tilden Road, I'm sure if there's a wetlands issue, it would have to go before the Conservation Commission without a doubt, after the ZBA. If Mario's here, he'd tell me, but Jim or John, whoever's been liaison to that commission, I'm sure they're not gonna just issue a permit, if that's the case.
Okay. So what I would urge the town to do is, and the town officials, is to really negotiate with AT&T, and I'd urge AT&T to do the same, and get something that is palatable, that's going to be safe, that's going to have an adequate fall zone. And I'm not clear why, it's, why we can't really discuss exactly where it's going to be, or where the proposed site is in Wampatuck. There seemed to be some confusion on that.
We have a map of it here, exactly. It's just not the best map I've seen. It's on an 8x11 sheet. It's not the center of the paper, but I know exactly where it's going to go, according to this map. To answer your question, I think you're talking a little bit about the DAS system, and I only attended the one meeting, so I'm not an expert on it, but the way our topography and the height of our trees, that would not work. And I was convinced by attending that meeting, and I think as Tony was, John as well, that would not work. That was
That was from our
discussed.
consultant.
All right, okay, and that was discussed years ago.
And
It's just,
I'm not talking about the DAS system.
well,
I
you're
think
talking
that's
about
what,
smaller
that's the
antennas.
smaller things on,
Smaller antennas, you can put
that's the
them
DAS.
in flagpoles.
I think, and not to interrupt you, but I don't know, a lot of work has been put into this, so a lot of spaces have been looked at. I think the consultant went through 36 different diagrams of all different possible spaces and putting two towers up and different heights at different ones. I think my sense of it is, and I'm not an expert on this by any means, is that they've done their research. We've taken many steps down this path. This is just in being picked out of a hat and going forward here. And it's my thought from the meetings I went to is it's going to go at 336 Tilden Road if we don't do something at a different location. And the only one that AT&T is interested in is Wampatuck. So, we can pretend like that's not going to happen, but every indication I'm getting is it's going to happen. Correct me if I'm wrong. We can...
I understand what you're saying, but again, I would urge you to look at the federal law a little bit more closely. I don't see that I think there's some confusion on what it says. And clearly, if the carriers had a right to put up the antennas anywhere they said they had a substantial gap, then we would see these things in backyards all over the country. You don't see that.
But they don't want to because it costs a lot of money to put up an antenna. They're only putting them up where there's a significant gap.
Profitability.
So, that's what I'm getting.
Jim, jump in if if something's off base here,
Well,
but
the issue is not, if there is a significant gap, then that invokes the Federal Telecommunications Act and its preemption of local zoning. You still have the issue of, are there alternative sites that either comply with or are more compliant with zoning? But that is a matter for the issuing of the permitting authority to determine. And part of the evidence that they take is, are there other available sites that are more compliant with zoning? And that's something that the zoning board has to consider. Now, it's my understanding that part of the presentation, I haven't been there, you've seen more than I have, has addressed that issue, and that's a finding that the zoning board could make. If they, in their fact-finding, determine that there are other available sites that are more compliant with zoning, that would be a basis to deny the permit. I just don't know what the evidence is on that, and the only thing I think we've heard is the Nile Terrace, which I think, as I've heard tonight, there are problems with the property in terms of whether it can be used, and then secondly, I don't know where that stands in terms of, would it solve the
Coverage.
gap in coverage?
All right. The woman holding the baby, and you had a question?
My
Your hand
window's
up.
gonna close really soon.
All right.
Excuse me. Tracy Shepherd, 34 Cairo Circle. I'll preface this by saying I've been to every ZBA hearing that's taken place on this issue this year, so I feel reasonably well informed. And I would also say that I'm among the townspeople who have been paying an attorney to block that site. So I'm certainly not coming here to say, I think we should go to 361 Tilden. What I want to say is we recognize that there's no good solution and that they are intending to invoke this federal law. I think Ms. Ahern made a very credible point that there are a number of litigations that have taken place that may suggest otherwise, but I realize you're not going to decide that part of it tonight. I think the points to consider are the pain is going presumably to be felt by someone. So at this point, minimize the people who are going to feel the pain. I can see that 361 Tilden location from my back porch. It's not like it's far, it's not like it's out of my presence of mind, but it will not be 100 feet from my children for the next 10 years. And, you know, Mr. Vignani asked the question of what's the difference, you know, from the exposure, the tower being at the school versus, you know, several hundred feet away. It's significant. You might remember I was one of the people who came to see you in March, I think it was, and I threw out a number. The roughest way to explain how the signal strength drops is 1 over r squared. So think about it, you're here and it's 1, and you go half the distance, it becomes half, and then it becomes a quarter, and then it becomes 15. So yes, the signal obviously has to reach to every home they're intending to cover, but the closer you are, it's a considerably greater signal strength that you're exposing people to. You're the last, apparently, as Gemma indicated, you have the authority now to proceed with the lease if you go forward to it. It doesn't need to go back to town meeting. So I would remind you that this is the last chance that we have to consider the health effects of our children. That's not a grounds for denial from the ZBA. As long as the tower will be built with FCC compliance, doesn't matter. I could come here and give you 50 studies that say it could harm our children's health. It doesn't matter. They don't have the legal grounds to consider that. Only you do. And then I would say regarding the health issue, obviously Carla and Wendy shared a lot of detail with you. I'm one of the people who emailed you last week, and I sent you a link to an article that cited the American Academy of Pediatrics, who are not a kooky, uninformed bunch, and that they are calling for considerable more research on the effects of this kind of exposure in children. The article I sent does reference cell phones. This is the same exact kind of exposure. The difference is you can't turn it off. It goes nonstop the whole time, and you're much, much closer. I don't let my infant walk around with my cell phone up to her head. I wouldn't stand under a cell phone tower with her. You know, parents have to have some ability to control our kids' exposure to this. To put it that close, I appreciate wanting the money for the town. You know, I'm not looking forward to an override for libraries and middle schools, but the school's not a profit center. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And I would ask you to remember that we are so new in this technology in terms of the decades that it will be around, and what we will know in a few decades or possibly sooner may, alarm us. My neighbor referenced smoking, which seems absurd to say, but how many doctors smoked 50 years ago and said, we don't think there's really a problem? So, the health effects are a very real concern for the families who send their children to that school. The two sites are both undesirable, but to make the pain be felt by hundreds of Wampatuck families is not a good solution for our town. And the last comment I would make, just while I have your ear on the cell phone subject, is that there was some discussion of gas, and I just want to make it known because there seems to be some misperceptions about how that can work, because of course we're going to take this tower wherever it ends up, and then there are going to be other parts of town that need coverage. There are towns that are being served by DAS-like systems, and Wellesley is an example, and I believe it was stated at the ZBA hearing that it's not. They are. The difference is that Wellesley has put together their own neutral host system. It's cost prohibitive for one carrier to one, but the towns have the ability, the places where these kinds of things are happening are where the town planners have the insight to say, we're going to build this and we're going to bring revenue in that way. by owning these types of distributed systems. Not relevant to this, but, you know, for your education. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the, yes, this girl's here.
Going to the point that she just made about the proximity to one of these towers and the health concern, I can't consider those. Putting it at the site at 361 Tilden Road, it's literally like 60 feet from my backyard and everyone else's, and all of these people have families and they have children as well. If you're putting it at the Wampatuck site, I think that I'm correct in saying that it's a considerable distance further from the actual school. So that I don't feel that, you know, overriding and saying, oh, don't put it at the Wampatuck site because it's near children. It's in our backyards, like it's right there. It's so much closer, and it's going to have, you know, twice the effect or whatever it is according to that equation that she received. So I think that it would make more sense if it has to be one of these two sites, as you said, to put it at the Wampatuck site where you are getting money from it. It is further away from the population. It just makes more sense to me.
Okay. I'm just going to go to the gentleman here with his hand up, then I'll go back to you.
My name is Richard Serkey. I represent a number of the abutters to the proposed Tilden Road site. I just wanted to make a point of information, and that is that, as you probably know, a petition has been filed for the insertion into the warrant for the special town meeting to be held in the coming 3 months for an article that would authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into issue an RFP for the Nile Terrace site. I mention that not because I want to discuss the merits or demerits of that site here tonight, but I wanted to mention it because it's not just a choice between Tilden Road and the Wampatuck School, but the Nile Terrace site is a 15-acre site owned by the town, and it would require no side yard setback variances, and it's 1,000 feet from the nearest home. And so if the town meeting votes to authorize the board with respect to that site, as it did with respect to Wampatuck, then it would be incumbent upon those who receive the RFP to explore that site and see whether or not a tower could be built there that would satisfy or substantially satisfy the needs or the gap that's been reported to exist. It may not be perfect, but it may be better than the status quo. And I find it hard to believe that the location of wetlands could not be overcome by the submission of notice of intent and the issuance of an order of conditions. So I just mentioned that to you from the perspective of making sure you realize it's not just two that are in play, but if town meeting votes to give you authority, there'll be three in play.
All right, thank you.
I just want to ask a question of AT&T. Someone said earlier they were questioning the positioning of the tower, be it Wampatuck or be it Tilden. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the reason it's there is because of the safety issues along the coast. Would we be not losing that if we were at the Niles, at the other road location?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, in other words, there was a positioning, the gap coverage, the positioning was gone through and done for the fact of being able to pick up the loss of coverage along our coast, which is where our big safety issues are.
There are a couple of areas where the gap opens up if we move over to Nile Terrace.
Yes.
It's going to be very complicated with respect to the RF engineer's testimony, but it provides a lot of redundant coverage to another site. So the antennas get used up for somewhere we're already providing coverage because it's going to absorb those callers, which diminishes the ability to reach out to the coast. So I don't want to get into a zoning hearing, but our testimony at zoning was Nile Terrace is not something AT&T would be interested in.
Okay.
We don't know about the wetlands, but it does open gaps, which means that there'll be another site eventually down to fill those gaps.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, woman in the black, then you had said something earlier. I'll get to everyone. The woman in the black, could you just identify yourself?
Robin Glazier, 26 Persimmon Drive.
I've been trying to email these to you guys, and it keeps coming back. I'm obviously doing something wrong when I scan these in, but these are the maps. I have copies tonight of the Wampatuck coverage, the Tilden coverage, and Nile Terrace. And, you know, the gaps along where, you know, this looks to me like the lighthouse area, you know, are similar between the, you know, Nile Terrace and Tilden, and there are still gaps over there even with Wampatuck. You can see that they're all very similar. Now, they're stating that there's some overlap with the Nile Terrace site, but the fact that that really hasn't been fully vetted seems to be sort of short-sighted. If it did come up at town meeting and people approved to lease the land and to inspect it, and we got an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission to build the road and then reestablish whatever wetlands, which happens all the time, you can see that they're quite similar, and I know that there's some overlap, but the TCA states and recognizes that 100% coverage is really not necessarily feasible, and that reasonable coverage is considered a win. And it's just important that we not forget that there is another possible option here. And I have copies of these if you want them. I can try to email them again to you, but I have copies tonight.
You can just give them to Kim.
I understand what you're saying. Would we be running the risk if, you know, at first I really didn't want to discuss it at all, but just hear me out for a second. Would, you know, if we would definitely be going backwards, taking a step backwards, would we run the risk of having a tower built at 361 while we're exploring this? That, I know what you're saying, and to answer his question, wetlands can be replicated. You know, if anyone that knows me, you know, understands that. And I think anything can be done as far as that goes. But I got a nod from Jim. I'm just afraid if this would be going back to square one. And I think if we said no tonight to looking at Wampatuck School, I think in some period down the road, we'd have a tower at 361. And I don't know what the ZBA, I see Sarah in the background, I don't know how quick, or would that be built in, and when now we're looking at Niles Road? I don't know. It's, yeah, you can respond, but I don't know if, I wish the town administrator was here to answer that question. She might have a better handle on it, but it seems to me it hasn't been discussed. I was born and raised in this town. I had no idea what Niles Road was until someone told me.
Well, neither did I until I moved here and realized that the town was going in. But that is still something that's going on through the ZBA process. This was all brought up at the very last ZBA meeting near the end. And, you know, there are other creative ways. That gap over there by the lighthouse, there was a really cool email circulating of how they accomplished to fill a gap in Long Island, I think it was, and they had a dry docked sailboat, which was actually a cell tower that covered a gap area. So if there were still a gap, for instance, as you see on that map, a couple of them at the lighthouse, you could do something like that. I mean, there are creative ways to take care of that without creating all of this, you know, I think it's blight. I think it's, you know, blight on our
Thanks. I'll look at them later. Okay. The woman in purple in the center. Yes. Pink, I'm sorry. Light purple.
I just wanted to mention that on in a ZBA meeting on October 4th, 2010, when the various sites were mentioned, Mr. Perry said the 4 other sites would work, and that included 0 Nile Terrace. It's an exact quote, and it's in the minutes.
I believe you. All right, okay. I wasn't there. This woman here, again.
I just have 2 questions. One is, I'm asking that you maybe exhaust these other ideas, locations, considerations before considering the school. And to Tracy's point, this is the last chance we have to be able to make a decision based on health effects, which obviously is the biggest concern that we have right now. So that sits with your decision tonight. And then if Wampatuck remains on the table, is there a way to position it so that it's 500 feet from the school, so that we feel a little bit better about its proximity to the children?
Good question. I don't know if we have 500 feet, because I don't know where, it's not 500 feet right now, I'd be willing to bet, but I don't know if we own, I don't know where this, I don't have a plot plan of Wampatuck School, I guess what I'm trying to say.
If you need 150 feet of fall, there's not,
I was trying to figure that from the
you got a table down here. That's 400.
While you guys are looking at that, the gentleman against the door had his hand up. Do you still have a question?
I just want to say something. It's Todd Breitenstein, 18 Marshall Ave. I want to thank everybody here for coming tonight, and especially all of you that have been working so hard on both sides of this issue, from Tilden Road and from the Wampatuck School. And I just want to say that, especially my wife as well. But driving through town this week, I've noticed that the DPW has been around, and they've been sprucing up all the schools, putting out fresh mulch, cleaning up, and the teachers have been showing up to prepare their classrooms. And obviously the school department's been working continuously all the year to guide our schools to the future. And they want to put the best foot forward, because the students are coming back and they want to welcome them. And they're going to send a message all across town this week that to take pride in your school, to work hard and respect each other. And at the same time, they're going to send the message that your school is a place where you're safe, free from worry, and you're safe to learn. And those are great messages to send. Whereas constructing a cell phone tower at the Wampatuck School and on the school grounds sends a completely different message. It sends the message and it says that we may care enough to put up a new flag and paint a flagpole. We may care enough to put up flowers and fresh mulch, but we don't care enough to keep an industrial tower from the grounds of your school, from looming over your school, from casting its shadow on your playgrounds. And we shouldn't contradict the work and the message that all of our teachers and school board does to send the right message to our children by putting up this giant tower over their school. It sends the wrong message. It's not the place at the school for a cell phone tower. Not now, not ever in the future. No cell phone tower at the Wampatuck School. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? I'm going to have to take a vote. The only thing that I was thinking today, and I don't know why I just thought of it today, I have 3 children. My youngest one is 16. I asked some of the others how old their children were, and it was touched on tonight. And I don't doubt anyone's woman who talked about the effects of a cell tower. I'm certainly not going to dispute anything like that. But our kids, at what age, they all have cell phones, and they are on them all the time. There's no more going to your room or anything. You want to reprimand one of your children, you take their cell phone away, and they're going to come right around very, very fast. So I honestly, I have a hard time thinking that whatever's, given off these is any different than a tower. One other, and I've read just about every email that people have written, and one that stuck out, was a woman that lives on Tilden Road somewhere. Maybe they're here tonight, I don't know, but they have a young child that lives very, very close to the tower, versus a school where a child is there for 6 or 8 hours a day. I know you're shaking your head, but, this is a ball that's getting tossed back and forth. None of us are real happy about having to make a decision here tonight. I guess I do like the idea, and, throwing this out there to you other board members there. If there's somehow, I want to do it right. I want to do it right the first time. You raised a very good point, and I really never thought about it. When our parents were growing up, smoking wasn't bad for them. They were told it's fine. Now we found out differently, obviously. But if there's a way, and you probably don't want to hear this, but I'd like it, if Niles Road, and again, this is probably we're gonna probably have a room full of people from Lawson Road and Kingsway and Delta Lane that might see it, but I heard 1,000 feet or something like that. Possibly take a better look at Niles Road. That's not something I was thinking about before tonight, but if there's a way to do it right. And I tend to agree on Niles Road, there'd be more gaps in coverage down by the Sand Hills and Lighthouse Road. but maybe it would better serve Minot, where there's another gap in coverage. So having said that, open it up to a motion, and I am
Could
just...
I offer one more comment? Just
Sure.
because there's one fact here that I want to make clear, because there's a lot about health that's been discussed, and I've said, I'm not a health engineer, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a doctor, but we live in the world of facts. And back in 2011, we had Dr. Hayes come and not do a prediction, not do a hypothetical, but he measured exactly what's coming out of the antennas at this location. And all of the antennas combined are less than 1% of the FCC standard. Now, it's not that there's no standard, there's a very strict standard, and it's been studied and researched, and it's promulgated by the FCC. Smoking is not a question, is not an issue that's in the same balance. These emissions are regulated by the FCC, and there is safety built into them. And again, if people will listen to the facts, they may not agree, but at least it'll be based on facts. So all of the antennas that are transmitting at this tower in 2011 were emitting less than 1% of the FCC standard. So Dr. Hayes, in a report for the board, for this town, came out here and measured and said, we could replicate that 100 times at this location and still be within the FCC standards. So our obligation to the zoning board is to prove, and to the building official, is to prove that we do and maintain the compliance with the FCC safety standards. So it's not that there's no standard and that no one knows what's going on. This is regulated by the FCC. So it's just one fact before we just go down a path of this is bad. There is a standard. It'll be, I think we predicted it'll be 1% from Tilden Road. It's less than 1% actually emitting from all of the antennas on this. So I would just ask you to keep that in mind in balance with this is bad, this is like cigarette smoking, who regulated what. The facts are the FCC has promulgated regulations. There has been discussion about updating those regulations, but that's what the FCC will be mandated to do if, in fact, Congress and the health professionals bring pressure to do something with the FCC. Since 1996, everything has been acceptable from all of the agencies that deal with these RF emissions. So it's not that there's nothing out there. It is heavily regulated, and we meet the safety standards by multiples.
All right, I'm just going to take one more question from the audience, if that's all right. You had your hand up first, all right?
I just wanted to state that the FCC standards are based on a 6-foot male of average weight, and they do not take into consideration an elementary school child size and weight. And also, and also back to your point about the teenagers with the cell phone, completely agree, and I don't know how I'll handle that when the time comes.
Good luck.
I know, it's gonna be hard. But again, they're further developed, they're further along in the process of growing than an elementary school child.
John had one.
Yeah, no, I've kind of been listening, and obviously, for those who were here back in March, understand where I was coming from, so reason for saying it now is I've been kind of listening to hear different things. I have to tell you, I think our duty here is to decide whether or not we as a board want to have an alternate site for a request for a proposal. Obviously, it was authorized by town meeting in 2011. The issue of health and safety is not really to be vetted by us. It's by the zoning board. The other issue you're dealing with is, a lot of you people were talking about reports and things. I mean, right now, that's what you're saying. I went online today because of the issues that were raised at the last meeting. I looked at the American Cancer Society, and they literally said, and I'm quoting it says, for reasons most scientists agree that cell phone antennas or towers are unlikely to cause cancer. You say it does, they say it don't. They say it does not. It went further and said cell phone towers are not known to cause any health effects. Well, I don't know whether they're right or not. It's the American Cancer Society. You're telling me there are empirical data out there. But again, that's for a hearing before the zoning board to hear. And I think, at this point, I go to Tony's point, which is, no, we're not selling out. we're also listening to the issues of neighbors in neighborhoods on Tilden Road who said they don't want it in the neighborhood. And I understand that there are some of you who are saying, no, let's put it on Niles Terrace. I submit to you, have you been in touch with the people on Lawson Road? Have you been in touch with people on Woodland Road? Are they here tonight saying, yes, we want it down at Niles Terrace? Because what we're doing is we're kicking the can further down the road to other people who probably don't know about this. So my position is, and I said this before, if there is empirical data that basically says that there is a health and safety issue, then I would agree with all of you that it should not be put anywhere other than in an area that is not going to be dangerous to our residents, to our children. But you're hearing, well, it's based on a 6-foot man, not a woman, not based on child. And then we're hearing from some other people who are saying, look, my kids are living there underneath the tower, day in and day out, except for maybe the time that they're gone to school. Versus people who are saying, well, my kids are going to school. I mean, we don't know. But the suggestion is, if there's a possibility, which is speculation at this point, then don't do it at all. And I disagree with that. Unless you actually have concrete, credible information or evidence, then I would say, you know, our obligation here is to suggest what's in the best interest of the town. And I, for one, would suggest that it's better to be at Wampatuck than it would be in Tilden. And if it turns out that you want to have an RFP, and Niles Rose is the suggestion after town meeting, and the town people say, put out an RFP, then I'll be the first one to say, fine, let's do that. And we'll find out if they're interested in it. But I don't think we should forego the opportunity of putting it at Wampatuck, given the fact that, you know, we're trying to take it out of a neighborhood where people are living and putting it on town property. And yeah, there is a bonus to it. We'll get some revenue. But certainly from my view of the area and in knowing the area, there are less people, aside from the school itself, residents by comparison at this proposed site than the other. So I, for one, would be in support of suggesting that at least we put an RFP out to see what happens.
I said I wasn't going to take any more questions, but you've been so good, and your baby's been so good. So if it's all right with this gentleman, I'm going to ask, you know, let her say one more thing.
I just want to clarify to Mr. Dennehy that specifically the zoning board is not allowed to consider health effects as long as the tower is built to be FCC compliant.
And that's the federal government who comes up with those regulations, who base it on health and safety, who's vetted through other departments or other federal government or departmental departments who take a look at the health and safety, which gets us into the preemption issue, which is what Attorney Toomey was saying. And so I would say to you, you know, they have been located at other schools, churches. Frankly, there's one right here, and as we're hearing, it's less than 1%. So I'm just saying that, you know, I disagree with what I'm hearing and speculating. If there was more concrete evidence that you're saying, there's this going on over here, this is going on here, there have been actually studies done by institutions and blah, 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 then I'd be more inclined to say, well, let's take a look at it. But that's not our function. That's the function of the ZBA, who's actually the permanent grading authority.
I would repeat that they may not consider that. All AT&T has to say is it will be FCC compliant. It's a static bar for them. You aren't held to that standard. You have the knowledge of saying, I know that the American Academy of Pediatrics says that this is going to be an issue and then we need to study it much further. I just wish to clarify that. I appreciate the consideration you're giving.
So I should discount what the American Cancer Society says.
The American Cancer Society said they just don't know.
And I read that study. I would respectfully disagree with your interpretation of it. It very clearly says that they're considering limited data, and I believe the words limited data are in there. And I don't believe there was anything that said explicitly that there was a certainty that it was safe. I believe that they had data suggesting that they think it is, but that they cited limited data. And the World Health Organization's 2B classification means that they do see a causal link. They just have insufficient data to prove yet that it's not biased. So I appreciate your consideration. I know that you're taking it seriously, but you know, I wish for you to consider that because you're the last people who can.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a vote if someone else up here has anything else to say. I appreciate everyone's comments and being so patient.
Well, I'll just say one quick thing. I think I've changed my mind, and I don't know.
I've changed my mind 3 times tonight alone.
So, at this point, it's very difficult. If we thought there were health concerns, we wouldn't want it anywhere, as John just said. But I think that I've got 4 little kids myself, and I probably wouldn't want it at their school. I know I wouldn't want it at their school. So I am, I think it's, in my opinion, we should put it back to the ZBA and let them do their job and let them find an alternative site that may be better fitting, as opposed to putting it at the school, is where I stand.
All right, if you want to, could I have a motion?
I don't have a motion.
Can you make one?
No, I would be against it, so.
All right.
Sure, I'll move to, I'm going to move to request that the town of Scituate issue a request for proposal to site a cell tower at Wampatuck School.
Do I have a second for John's motion? Not hearing one. Can I have a motion to let the ZBA continue with the hearings to locate a cell tower at 361 Tilden Road?
I don't think you have to. It's already there.
That's all right.
It's no point.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I guess that answers that.
Thank you.
Process is going to continue, 361. Thank you, everyone, for sitting in so long, being patient. Just going to give people a few minutes to move out and let the library people move in. Or
What about the children that are there underneath the tower?
we realize that.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
I don't think I'd switch roles, to tell you the truth.
Yep, no, we get it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
How's the telephone?
Jim, how are you?
Hopefully it'll go back to the ZBA and they'll consider alternative sites.
Right.
Do you want us?
Up here? You want them up at the table?
Sure, yes, please. Yep. No sense in sitting down.
I was going to say.
Shut the, would it be better with the doors shut still?
Yeah, let's try, maybe it'll,
Fresh air, maybe?
well, AC's on.
Yeah, right.
Wanna try?
Maybe Ruth, can you shut?
Shut that door. Marla?
We're back.
That's my... Looks like she's got it. I think she's got it. Thank you for being patient. We appreciate it. This agenda item, for those that you don't know, it is a discussion and a vote of our library project. I'd like to thank the trustees and the members of the foundation. Jess, thank you for coming out tonight. This group has been looking for some direction from us on where we stand for their project. I'll let you present first, and then we'll have some discussion up here, all right? If you don't mind, start, just kind of maybe recapping for those, condensed version, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for seeing us tonight.
Thank you.
And as you know, we're here about the library renovation and expansion project. We currently have a $5 million grant from the state for a total of $12 million project, which requires a match from the town of $7 million. And the foundation has been hard at work to raise money. I'll let them speak to that a little bit later, but they've raised a little over $600,000 to date. And We're hoping to bring this to special town meeting in the fall for people to decide whether or not they want to move forward with the project. And we've talked a little bit in the past, so I just wanted to kind of update you about things that have happened since we last met. And one of those was on July 16th. I met with Jen Morrison of the Public Facilities Master Plan Committee, and we discussed what works and what doesn't work in the library currently and what the key issues are. I sent you guys, I hope you got a copy of the current list of repairs for the library. So we discussed a lot of those needs, and we discussed what the library renovation project would cover and how that would address some of those needs. Then on July 18th, we met with Town Administrator Patricia Vincasey, Karen Canfield, and another trustee, Jay Swartz, and myself to discuss the tax impact of the project. We had previously met with Town Assessor Steve Jarzembowski, who had given us a number, and we ran it by Tricia, who approved of the number. And that number is $46 per year for the 20-year life of the loan for an average house in Scituate, which is currently assessed at $476,100. So that is the predicted tax impact of the project. And then lastly, this list that I've given you, I have discussed it in the past, but I just wanted you to know that it has been updated. I think I left in the 2007 estimates, but actually Kevin Kelly updated it with 9% inflation added to some of those 2007 figures, and that's sort of based on a rounded number for inflation. However, these figures do not necessarily represent quotes. They represent his best estimates for what these things would cost. They also don't necessarily include all of the needs of the library. They'd include the most pressing needs, what we consider to be the biggest needs, things that we'll continue to put forward as capital projects in the future. And so that's all I really have to say, except that I know that Tricia had given me some questions after my meeting with Jen Morrison, and she passed on those responses to you. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Or if you have any other questions that I can address, please let me know.
I don't at this time. Marty?
I know you guys have been hard at work. Obviously, it's a difficult time right now, and with everything we've got going on. But my belief is I do believe we should let it go to town meeting and let the people decide. Like I said, we've got our water issues, we've got a lot of things happening. But with everything we have and looking at the cost of the repairs and things like that, I'd like to let the people decide what's going to happen. So.
John or Tony?
Whatever.
Well, go ahead.
I didn't know if, John, you want to go? Or?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I agree with Marty that the town should decide this. The foundation has put in a lot. They've got the grant that's pending, that's going to expire. That's what's kind of putting our time limit on it. I think I don't completely support the project, not because I don't think it's a good project, it's because of the big picture of everything else that's going on. And I think that in a different time, it would be a no-brainer, and we would just go ahead and do it. But I just wrote a list of 12 other things that are going on in the town right now, and at some point in time, the people just aren't going to be able to pay for all of these things. So, I think all of us in our head kind of put this priority list together and say, what are the top, and what can the town sustain in terms of spending? And the library's not in my top couple things. We've got brown water, we've got seawalls, we've got middle school, we've got flood insurance, we've got public safety complex, we've got town hall, we've got a senior center, we've got the library, we've got pension expenses that are going to be going through the roof, sewer expansion, a $20 million capital plan. So, but this is a democratic form of government. It's not my decision. It's our job here to inform the people of what they're voting for and let them decide. So I agree with Marty that it should go to the people and let them decide, and I think it's our job to inform them of what the other issues are, and that they have to decide whether they want their $46 to go towards a library or they want their $46 to go towards a seawall or whatever. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think the whole scenario is, I've spoken with Tricia about it, and that's what our form of government allows. I mean, if we chose not to put it on there, all you have to do is get 10 signatures at an annual town meeting or 100 signatures at a special town meeting, and you can put it on the warrant yourself. So I think the decision tonight is really going to be, do we put it on the warrant, or do you guys have to go out and get 100 signatures, of which the 4 of us will sign it, I guarantee you. But I'm concerned about giving the perception that we support the project when maybe we all don't, by putting it on the warrant. But I fully believe that it should go on the warrant. So I'll stop talking for a second and probably say something. But let John go through. And
Unless it's all right with John to defer to you, Les?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Do you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
You know, 2000, I think it was 8, was when you first came before us, when it wasn't actually you, Les, or Karen, and Jesse, it wasn't you either, but when you'd asked about whether or not to apply for a grant with the library, trying to obtain $5 million, and we as a board said, yes, let's go try to do that. And the board supported you wholeheartedly. Obviously, some things have changed in the interim as far as the financing, but I'm not going to pull the rug from under you. I support you 100%. And I think this needs to go to town meeting, and that the people at town meeting will make that decision. And if we get the votes for the override, we've got a new library. So I'm going to support you 100%.
Thank you.
I think I've spoken to, I think it was Karen Conley and a couple of you people. I kind of see where Tony's coming from. I probably would have had a different opinion before July. But those phone calls I was taking about the brown water and about effects it has on the children, I didn't, again, like the cell tower people, I didn't have an answer. But I said to some of those people, I remember one guy in Country Way, I said, this is not the only issue. We have, other things. And I mentioned the library. I promised him that I would put this issue first. And I realize there's a time frame. That's the hard sell here. After 12/31, that handout goes away. If all else fails, things have to be done there. That is one of the nicest looking buildings in this town, and it cannot fall in disrepair. I, like Tony, don't want to stand in your way. I'm not going to lay down in front of your project and say, vote no, vote no. I'm not going to do that. That's just the way I might feel. But let the townspeople decide, and I have no problem if the majority decide to go ahead and do that. I have no problem with that. I just feel that project, especially that the water, we have to straighten it out. And I asked these guys tonight. I said, did anyone hear about when was the last water complaint we had? We haven't had it, just what we predicted. But you can rest assured it's going to be back next summer. So that's where I stand. But no problem moving it forward. I personally couldn't vote for it. That's all. But I have no problem if the majority of the town people, like I said, want a new library. That's great, wonderful, and I will, help any way I can to have that go forward. I'll listen to the people, I guess. Right. And
Les wants to update you on where we are in the fundraising, but I really want to thank you for your candor and for your support.
This is hard, like that.
It is
last
hard, and we
agenda item, to be
recognize
sitting
that.
here, it's not fun.
I really think this, aside from the fact that I think this is the right thing to do, and the town has been moving toward this since 2005, we've been working toward this sort of finish line, is, as you say, it's a unique opportunity that goes away. And I fervently think that everyone should have the chance to make that vote, because we won't get to have that again. So we really do appreciate the support. And Les will tell you how much money we made this week.
I'm Les Ball. I've been here before, but I live on 40 Driftway. I'm part of the Scituate Library Foundation, and I'm co-director of the Building for the Future campaign. We've got over 60 people on our team that have been working on this project, and I'm proud to announce tonight that we have a new member of our team. General Judge Casey has agreed to work with us. and support the project. And we're very pleased to have General Casey as part of the project. You probably have noticed that we don't have any fish around town anymore. The fish left on Friday. At the end of our silent auction, we also had our evening at Margaritaville night at Scituate Country Club, where we had over 240 people in attendance. It was jam-packed. Our project made over $40,000, and so we have to thank the 60-plus artists, the businesses that are involved, everybody else that was involved. It was absolutely amazing. Several people left the auction and gave us large checks. We now have over $600,000 in our coffers, and we have been told by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners that the project like we have, we can easily raise $2 million. But we have also been told that a lot of the money comes, you've heard this before, comes after the building starts, and so we're not stopping. And if we get approval at town meeting, we're going to continue to work our tails off to make that happen and try to reduce the load on the citizenry of the state. We've had personal donations from over 350 people already. We also, if we count everybody who've been involved, people helped organize the Margaritaville, organize the fish event and everything. We've had over 800 people who have been to events, been involved in things. So this is not something that 4 or 5 of us have put together and concocted. We've got a lot of support, and you look around the room, and I think we've got 25 people here tonight. So it's something that people are interested in, and we really appreciate it if you put it on the warrant and at least help us go that direction, and we'll work hard to make it happen. We're working with the Friends of Situate's Future to help on getting out the vote, and we promise them that we'll work with them when their school comes to be. So we'll work jointly on that, because we know the two go together. You can't have a high-level school system without a decent library. They go hand in hand, and so we're working very hard at that, and I appreciate everything that you've said tonight.
Just to make it clear, the town, correct me if I'm mistaken, appropriates to $7 million. Anything they have raised comes back, but we have to upfront.
12. We have to.
Oh, yeah, all right, I'm sorry, 12, and then the match of 5, but I was thinking of the $7 hour share. You know, if they, they can, I believe they had 600, let's say they had $1 million, we still have to raise the full amount, and then it gets taken off, as I understand it.
Do you want to speak to the language at all? It does have to be voted in. The language has to be 12 million.
Right,
And then
okay.
the state will reimburse the 5 million.
And then the donations offset that.
Absolutely,
Come as a
yeah.
gift, yeah.
All right, and I agree. I maybe once things get rolling along, hopefully it will snowball, and then the donations just get that much bigger, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate, I think it's our job to make sure that the public understands all of the things that are coming down the pipeline, the library being one of them as well, and they have to understand that they're going to vote for, there's going to be a new middle school that's going to come before them, and there's going to be a safety center, and there's going to be a senior center. So all of these things, they just have to be aware of it, and that's what our job is. And if people want it, then they vote for it. And that's what the town government is. So I think the question is going to be, do they have to go get the signatures, or will we put it on the warrant ourselves?
Well, it doesn't say we have to have a vote, so I don't know. No, we can vote. We don't have a motion at this time.
Well, just so they
Send them
know,
the right
I think they
message, I
should
think
know.
we should vote.
Yeah.
I think we should vote.
I'll move to support the article for, an article to raise money through a debt.
Or to put it on.
Put it on the warrant.
Special
All right.
town meeting.
Fair enough.
And I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
And the only thing to add is that we'd also have to put the override question on there as well, so that it would go to the ballot.
Yeah,
that's
So
right.
that it would be funded through an override, not the operations of the town or anything like that.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, no problem. Give you some direction, all right? Oh, you are. We are. Continue. All right?
Hey, it's impressive, Les, how much money you've gotten. That's great.
Oh, it's been wonderful, and I'll tell you, seeing people come and get the fish.
Oh, yes, it was really
That was a great idea.
Yes, we did. It was unanimous,
Yeah.
4-0. This is a pretty easy one. I'm just gonna move on to number 7. All right? Agenda item number 7 is to vote files. All right. I just thought we could get like 3 of them done. Try shopping. Try.
Click the lights. Less.
Thank you. Just trying to move things along here a little bit. Number 7 is a vote, discussion and a vote to file a special legislation to lift the restriction, the use restriction, Pier 44, 44 Jericho Road. With a vote tonight, we could ask our state rep to do just that. Up till now, it was limited, as we know. The MBTA given us funds, and we're very limited. We have a committee in place to tell us what we could do, but as we all know, our hands are quite tied. So we've explored this and now found out this is the route we can take to remove it. Opens up some possibilities to do other things. Some are listed, if John, I see he's...
Yeah, no, I was
turning
going to
the page,
suggest
if
you
you'd
might
like
want
to read them.
you know, some of the prohibited uses. In other words, you can't use certain things at that location right now, based on a restriction on the purchase of it. For example, offices, or if you wanted some kind of retail shop. We can't do that down at Pier 44. If you wanted to have some kind of small restaurant, something that the town would own, like we do at the golf course, can't do that. Anything about storage, it's like equipment. So if we wanted to have like canoes or kayaks, can't really do that because, again, it's a business and trying to store different things. So these are some of the uses that what we're trying to do is request the legislature to enable us so that we can use it for a long-term goal and open up more uses available at that location.
While we have this nice bullet point, want to just read down how we all, it takes about 15 seconds. Read down how we obtained it, money we spent. So
Sure. The project history, it deals with, was acquired by the town meeting, by town meeting approval. Property was purchased in its entirety with MBTA mitigation funds. In other words, when the train came to town, MBTA provided the town with mitigation funds to be able to use in various locations, primarily in the designated centers where the train stop is, Greenbush and also in North Scituate, as well as the various intersections along the way where the train crosses over. Funds that were in excess were used to be able to purchase Pier 44. The purchase price for Pier 44 was $1.87 million. In conjunction with that, the MBTA did say that by purchasing it, we're going to limit the use at that location for specific, certain things. And that was a condition on the funding. So in order for us to be able to kind of go further and do some things that a lot of people are asking us, why can't you do this and why can't you do that, we need to get permission from the legislature to be able to say, can we go beyond those use restrictions to be able to do certain things? And the purchase was contingent on that use restrictions being a part of that sale. So what we're trying to do is see if we can get another avenue of use, and that's why we're considering it tonight, to just lobby our legislators.
Yep, that's it. We just need a vote here tonight to start the process. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
I don't think it's going to be easy, but seems like a good thing to try.
That's right. I don't think there's any harm in trying.
Do you have a
Questions,
motion?
thoughts from the audience? If not?
Yep.
Sure.
Marty's got it.
All right.
Motion?
Please, Marty.
Yep. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to request that our elected representative in the Massachusetts legislature file legislation on the town's behalf to remove the use restrictions placed on the property located at 44 Jericho Road as part of the MBTA's approval of mitigation funds to acquire such property.
I have a motion and a second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None, 4-0. Thank you. Next agenda item is an acceptance of a resignation from the Public Facilities Master Plan Steering Committee.
Move that the Board of Selectmen accept the resignations of Maura Clancy, Jeff Dugan, and Victor Mulligan from the Public Facilities Master Plan Steering Committee.
I have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Kim, can we send those people a letter thanking them if we could? Thank you. Agenda item number 9, I believe, is some appointments to some vacancies, Council on Aging and this Public Facilities Master Plan Steering Committee and the Waterways Commission.
I'll move the Board of Selectmen appoint Deborah Young to the Council on Aging.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
And I will move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Ann Burbine as an at-large member and Ann Breen to the Public Facilities Master Plan Steering Committee. And Ann Breen is from the Commission on Disabilities.
Thank you. A motion and a second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye. Move the Board of Selectmen, I'm sorry.
I just said thanks, Ann.
Move the Board of Selectmen reappoint Peter Topham, David Glancy to the Waterways Commission.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Right. Like I said earlier, the town administrator is not in tonight. She's not feeling well. So we'll jump over to her report. Going on to other business. We'll start with the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, other business, minutes, correspondence, whatever we want to start. If someone has the minutes, we could start there.
Sure. Move the Board of Selectmen vote to accept the regular session minutes of March 12, 2013.
Second.
And a second. Thanks, Tony. All in favor?
Aye.
Marty was not here, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Will the Board of Selectmen vote to accept the regular session minutes of August 6, 2013?
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, takes care of our minutes. Correspondence, is there anything, Marty? Did I
Yeah.
see you had something?
I got something here.
Thank you.
There's an annual food drive to benefit the Scituate Food Pantry on Saturday, August 24th at the SBA. The Sandhillettes are holding the annual food drive to support the Scituate Food Pantry. Donations can be dropped off at the SBA located at 88 Scituate Ave on Saturday, August 24th from 8 to 10 a.m. Non-perishable donations can include canned goods, boxed food products, paper products, personal hygiene, and all sorts of soaps and detergents. Please be sure to check the expiration date. Also, volunteers will gladly accept your bag donations between the hours of 8 and 10 on the 24th.
Is that all we have for correspondence?
I think so.
Okay, thanks, Marty.
Other business?
Yes, please. Tom?
Yeah, two quick things. First one, I wanted to thank The Gathering for playing last weekend down at the Cole Parkway. It was a great time, a beautiful night. They came and played for about 2 hours, and there were probably 100 people there. And it really was, kind of special that Scituate can go and do that. And the Chase family goes out there with many other musicians and gives a free concert like that. It was really, really, really nice, so I want to thank them for that. Second, just an update on the police chief search. There was a committee of 9 of us?
Yes.
And Jim, I don't know how much detail I can give on this, but in broad terms, Sean and I were on the committee, and we interviewed a number of candidates and narrowed it down to 3 candidates, actually 4, where one chose not to continue, and they went to an assessment center, and then another panel over the weekend. And, just to let everybody know that the process is continuing on. There's 3 people that are under consideration right now. And I think all the results are being tabulated from the police chiefs that did the assessment and from the feedback from the public panel. But I think the process went really good. We got probably over 30 applicants. We interviewed 9. And, we've got a really good feel of the people that are looking to be police chiefs now. And I think we have a couple of really strong candidates there. So just an update on that.
That was very well put. I might add, a couple of, one person on that committee has been on other search committees and
Right.
thought that our process was by far the best he's been involved with. So it was pretty
Thorough, yeah.
exciting. It was very thorough, to say the least. Other business, John?
Labor Day's coming up in less than 2 weeks. There's a parade in, I guess you could say, Sand Hills. It's the Scituate Beach Association, yet again, that we talked about. It's Sunday, September 1st, 1 o'clock. It's a great folksy parade that I encourage everybody to go to, because it's really showcases your town and some of the whimsical and fun things that you see, and it makes your town really special. On Saturday, and I don't know the time, but I would assume it's somewhere around the same time period, in Hummerock, there's the Parade of Fools, or Parade of Fools, that they do. It's a little smaller, but if you're not doing anything, if you got kids, bring them out. It's a great event. The second thing I am going to toot a horn is that the 12-year-old Travel A baseball team is going to Cooperstown this weekend, and I know they've raised money. Various people had donated. They worked really hard, and I'll give you an update on how they perform after next week when we get back. But it's great to see our town sports and boys and girls getting out there and doing different things. I just noticed that football and all the fall sports are starting, and soccer. It's kind of sad to see the transition from summer to fall, but it's inevitable. But again, just wanted to give you a quick update on that.
Okay, Marty?
No, that's
all set. The other thing I have, I attended the FEMA meeting today with the town administrator, Neil Duggan, our Harbottle, and our zoning enforcement officer. It was up in Boston. Quite a group from Marshfield as well, but before I go on to say who was there, I have to say that Neil Duggan, our building inspector and zoning enforcement officer, was on vacation. He was in Rockport. He left his family in Rockport, drove to Scituate, went to Boston. Now he came back to Scituate. So, type of commitment, just to let you know that, when you see the residents, what are we doing? We were in Boston for 2 or 3 hours, along, like I said, with Representative Jim Cantwell, representative from Mr. Keating's office, I'm drawing a blank now. Who?
Lynch?
Yes, thank you, Stephen Lynch's office.
Our congressman.
That's right, I'm trying to, there were others, the room was full, but very well discuss, a lot of great discussion about how this came about, the appeal period, who has appealed successfully, insurance rates, a lot of stuff that I didn't realize. I learned an awful lot. The next, but more importantly, is the next meeting is on September 4th in Marshfield. It's open to the public. And the same group of people are going to be there from FEMA's contractors that drew these maps were there answering questions. So I encourage everyone, I hope Ruth and all the people in the media put this out, this meeting in Marshall. And I don't know exactly what building it is or the time. I just know it's September 4th. So.
It's at the Furnace Brook School
Is
in
it?
Marshfield,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that the one out front, the junior high school? Or is that an
Yes,
elementary
yes.
school?
I don't know if it's an elementary.
Okay. I just.
They believe
like
it's
I
a
said,
middle school.
There's a lot of questions asked and answered. Be a good opportunity for those people affected, the 500 people in this town that are affected, to get out and voice their opinion, see what they can do to make changes in these maps.
We
That's-
meet on the 3rd, right?
Yes, we are.
So we can reiterate it then again to remind people it's the Wednesday after our next meeting.
All right. The final agenda item, I think, is a motion to adjourn and sign documents.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion in a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Good night, folks.